What is up, guys? This is Florida Man Does Weather, and we're back today to talk something new. Investments, particularly Invest 93L, and the fact that it's a bad investment. It looks ugly, it looks terrible. The mid level circulation is separated from your surface circulation, and they're both on land now. Heavy rain for Louisiana, and eventually that moisture is going to circle back out over into the southeast Atlantic coast, and then back to Florida, and then back to Louisiana again. So it'll be back.
Well, what goes around comes around.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We got a merry-go-round of a high pressure centered over Georgia. If you're in Georgia, David, I'm talking to you. It's not going to rain Friday and Saturday. Don't believe your phone. All right.
Dreaded weather app.
Oh,
So we're meeting this evening again for another round of Tropical Talks with Dr. Sam. He's joining us again so we can take a look at where we stand with the seasons that has so far been nice and quiet. Had a little bit of excitement with 93L. This week we had some flooding events that you guys have obviously been well aware of here in Plant City, and we had a couple of funnels and tornadoes, but besides that, 93L was all smoke and no fire.
Yeah, pretty much. There not much came of it. Not much came of it at all. I mean, it was just it was something to keep an eye on and something you thought could. But I mean, let's take a look at the satellite picture here. And I mean, it's an impressive blob of convection, right? That is over Louisiana right now. And this was a system that was tracked from really somewhere off the east coast of the United States. And, it kind of hugged, if you will, the coast. So it never really had a chance to get out over the water, right? But it was also a relatively small system. So that, it can spin up quite quickly, at least to tropical depression, tropical storm strength. But, they can also just fail to organize, especially if too much of the circulation was over land, which this was. And, in the large scale, right, just not in a very good place right now for tropical development. I mean, if you think about it, we've had three named storms, which, back in the old days, having three storms by, mid-July was wow. Now that happens frequently, but, keep in mind they were short-lived. Uh, they would never have been named 40, 50 years ago because we didn't have the technology, I don't think, back then to
Right.
diagnose these short-lived small cyclones. And you look at it, 6 hours, barely a tropical storm. Um, and I think there's probably a lot more of those back in the old days than we're aware of. But really, when you look at the accumulated cyclone energy, right, which is a measure of the longevity as well as the strength of systems, it's a nothing burger so far this season. So,
Absolutely.
we threw some names, but in terms of tremendous impact as tropical cyclones themselves, they really haven't done much.
And the funny thing is, too, ACE doesn't even start being taken into effect until it becomes a hurricane. So our ACE for the season is still at a zero.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you just take a look at 40, 50 miles an hour for 6 hours, really, I know. I mean, listen, range from these storms, as we all know, right, is really independent to a large extent of what the maximum wind speed is, right?
Right.
And
mhm.
sometimes tropical storms, tropical depressions can dump a whole lot more rain than a hurricane does in a given location, especially if they stall out or whatever the synoptic pattern is, right?
Mhm.
So it's not to diminish, the rain threat from these even non-named systems. But in terms of what we tend to think of with tropical cyclones, which is wind and storm surge, right? They haven't done much yet.
Sure.
Yeah,
But
even
that's
I
also
saw.
climatology. I mean, really the peak of hurricane season. I mean, August, September, October, right, are typically the
Mhm.
three busiest months. But the real
Right.
peak between mid-August and mid-October. That's when you see your three, fours, and fives, your category three, fours, and fives. Right? That is prime time. Anything you get on either side of that, while not uncommon, right, is falling outside of the peak of the season. Right. And if we recall back to last year, right, September, for the most part, there was nothing that went on for like 3 weeks. And then we had this burst of storms, right? From later September, well into October, really into early November, I guess you could say, before the season just abruptly ended. And, at some point, I imagine we're going to have a burst.
Right.
But, we're going to have to wait and see until everything in the end just kind of lines up for that. And we're just not there right now.
Yeah, I was looking at me and Caleb were looking at the Atlantic a couple of days ago and just looking at the flow, and it's just, I mean, it's no man's land out there in regards to systems. I mean, we watched a really robust wave. Uh, Dr. Sam, you probably saw it too, come off a couple of days ago. It had great looking vorticity.
That's
I
the one
mean,
right in the middle.
and it just got
Right in the
ate.
middle.
Yeah, it just got destroyed. I mean, the shear, we went into a patch of 40-knot shear and got shredded to bits, like to the point you can barely even see it out in the central Atlantic now. It's just it's a graveyard out there right now.
Well, I mean, it really is. And if you take a look, right, if you take a look across, right, I mean, because, without looking at anything else, the satellite picture tells you something,
Yeah,
right? If you take a look here, we are devoid of deep convection,
yeah,
right? And when you are devoid of deep convection, right, when you're at this time of year and later on, and really any time of year, really, it's because the air is sinking. And when it sinks, it dries out, and that doesn't support deep convection. You want air to be neutral or rising to allow convection to develop and thrive. And, we're just basically in a broad area of subsidence across the Atlantic, right? I mean, you can see way off here on the edge, a couple little clusters, but, they're going to fall apart too.
the moment they
Once
come out, they just die.
they just die. And this is, and that is the pattern that we're in. Right. One of the tools I like to use when we get into the hurricanes, without going into all the details about why it works, is looking at the MJO, right, the madden-julian oscillation and phase. Now, the madden-julian oscillation, right, is a very useful tool for, I think, using to forecast what, in general, the large scale, like we're talking synoptic
Right,
scale plus in terms of large scale, right? Favorability for tropical cyclogenesis. And when it's in an unfavorable phase, yeah, you might get a storm that develops, but you're not in one of those burst patterns where you get 3, 4, 5 storms in a 2 week period, right?
right,
You can have a storm that does good, but sometimes it struggles and it underperforms what the models may predict it to do, and things like that. And right now we are just not in a good phase of the madden-julian oscillation. We are in, and I can pull that up here just to kind of show you folks what I'm talking about. And again, we're not going to get into the nitty gritty of the MAO. But when I'm going to show you here it is right now. And it's broken out into phases. And we had talked about this before about the 200
hmm
millibar velocity potential and so forth, right?
right.
And so what I really want to draw your attention here, right, is May through September over here and these different phases. And, you have to look real close, but there is the west coast of Africa. Here's South America, right? Central America, there's Florida. There's Florida man doing weather. Right here is Mexico, and then here is right. So the Atlantic is right over here, and when you're in phases 3, 4, 5, and to an extent, and 6, and even phase 2 is on the edge, but phases 3, 4, 5, and 6 are a death knell. Really, it is really, really difficult to get anything going. I mean, yeah, you can get something. A lot of times, you get some home brew, which is a stalled front or something like that.
Right.
But you're in a phase 5 or phase 4. You're not getting one of these long track category 4 hurricanes that marches its way from the Cabo Verde Islands across the Caribbean and into the Gulf of America. Right? You're not getting that. When you get into phases 7, 8, and 1, yeah, that's when you really have to look out, because then you tend to have large scale neutral to rising motion across the Atlantic tropics. So, if you're getting the disturbances coming off and this, you get parked in one of these patterns in August, right? This is when you go hyperactive, right, in terms of activity, right? Even phase two, you'll get some things done, but phase two is it's better west and as you go further east, or it's better to the east. And let's say, for example, the storm off Africa moving westward in phase two, but that so it can run into some hostility in terms of the large scale pattern.
Right.
So I just without looking at anything, just seeing that, we're probably anywhere between phase 3 to 6, and that is tracked, and we can go take a look at the at where we are with that. Of course, all the models have this, and let's let's do we'll just use the global ensemble forecast system and how to take a look at it. These are right, it's kind of a weird little chart, right? But these numbers are the different phases. So, here's 1 and here's phase 2, and you wrote, right? And then what you do is you track it. And this is the last 40 days, right? And there's a 40-day map. So this actually starts on June 7th, right? Which is what that 7 means. And you're on the border between 6.
Right.
So you're right. And you can measure it each day. And when you're in this circle, it's kind of neutral, right? And then, here we are, July, the last measurement here was July 16th. And look at that, phase 5. And we just saw what the Atlantic looked like, right? Nothing going on out there, right? Now the forecast pattern here, right? And that's going to be, you see the colors with these. And then the individual model members here are the little lines, but the model mean here is this, right? You're through phase 6, and it kind of slows down, and by the beginning of August, it tries to eke its way into phase 7 in that particular model, right? In the GEFS, right? So, could there be something small, homebrew, close to home that develops the next couple weeks? Front stalls that, sure. But are we going to see the wave train coming off Africa with watching several areas? If this forecast is correct, no, I would say we probably won't. We probably won't see that. So this is a good tool to use to get a general idea of where the pattern is heading, right? Assuming, of course, that the GFS is right. I mean, there's other models we can take a look at here with that. And here's the CFS, the climate forecast system, right? This is going all the way out through mid-August, and it has it, and let's now just take a look at the forecast part. Right, here we are here, and it throws it into August it's in the neutral zone.
Yeah,
it sounds very Star Trek, doesn't it? But it's in the neutral zone in there. But that's when the signal kind of, I think, to at least from my experience, is it's not as much of a signal anymore for what goes on in the Atlantic. It could be good, could be bad. But it's 7 and 8, but it's kind of more neutral more than anything else. Just kind of see where what it does. That's the CFS. If we go over here, let's take a look at the European, right? The ECMWF. Right, this goes through the end of July. And that's taking it, again, into the neutral zone beyond beyond the alert for the Klingons, and you're 8 and into 1, but again, it's showing it rotating through phases 5 and 6, and then the bias corrected European, maybe not so far and everything like that. So yeah, it looks like in the next couple of weeks, we'll have to take a look. Now, because I got up this morning, and the first thing I looked at, of course, is the GFS, and there the 60 had a tropical storm roaring across the Outer Banks of North Carolina, developing into a hurricane on its way to the benchmark at 40 north and 70 west, which is where you want snowstorms to go in the winter. And of course, the 12Z didn't have it, but it's that type. It did have a mass of looks like showers that wanted to kind of follow in the path of non-Dexter across Florida. So we'll have to watch off the eastern seaboard and close to home for any of these fronts and so forth that may stall out over over the Gulf Stream or something like that. Because yeah, sometimes you get something that spins up
So,
after something like that.
question I did want to ask you, Dr. Sam, was I mean, obviously, we had a lot of activity last year. I mean, with the exception of Beryl, I mean, the Atlantic was pretty quiet in regards to big storms coming off of Africa. And like we were just saying, at least for a big chunk of this season, looks like it's going to be the same thing this year so far, at least through beginning of August. But the CAG, Central American Gyre, really delivered some major storms last year. And if I recall correctly, I think at least one of them came from the MJO being in phase two. So, what I wanted to ask you is because I've been obviously watching the height falls in the Western Caribbean because thankfully we have a lot of buoys in the Western Caribbean. And
Mhm.
while the gyre hasn't set up, I have been noticing that of course you'll have your days here and there where the pressure will rise, but it's like something's trying to get going. There's a lot of height falls steadily occurring across the Western Caribbean. So, with the MJO, obviously you got the Atlantic under lockdown. What are your thoughts on the Central American gyre trying to make a comeback and kind of maybe we have a season, but the season is going to be focused more on the Western Caribbean and the Gulf versus your traditional Cape Verde storms and your big fish storms rolling out past Bermuda and all.
Well,
It
I mean,
doesn't look
it's
like
a
it's
really
going to
good
happen.
question because I think one of the things we need to and let me pull up that here. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen here because I don't want to make everybody dizzy. I think one of the things that we need to basically to take a look at is what do sea surface temperatures look like
Hmm.
across the Atlantic basin, and I unfortunately don't have one readily available to show you from last year, but I do have one readily available from what's the date? It was either the 16th of July, so yesterday. Um, and I think we can all recall from last year, where there was some forecast showing we were going to have something like 30 tropical storms because the
Yeah,
oceans were literally boiling across the Atlantic. Um, and there were some pretty high sea surface temperature anomalies across the Atlantic last year. And while the Atlantic is still basin wide is running warm, as it does during a warm phase of the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation, which we're still in the warm phase of that, it is warm across much of the tropical Atlantic. And right, but it is from what I recall, this is not nearly as warm in the
No.
main development region, right? Where this is the main development region down here, MDR. It is not nearly as warm as it was last year.
no,
That doesn't mean that the water is cold. I mean, you're looking at, a 1 to, maybe 1 to 2 degrees Celsius, anomaly right now. Um, right? You find a lot of anomalously warm water here along the eastern seaboard, right? And in the western line. Although I will tell you here, why, because I'm in Duck, North Carolina, where the wind was howling out of the southwest today, the water temperature fell from 80 degrees the other day down to 62 because of upwelling.
Uh.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you, Ekman, and your transport. Go away. Not fun. But that's just right near the coast. Go a few miles offshore and you're splashing in the Gulf Stream 80-degree water and some water. So we're gonna have to see what the overall pattern, looks like because the warmth in the Atlantic, I think in terms of the magnitude of the anomalies, has shifted a little bit further north this year.
right.
As well.
It's almost like it's trying to do the whole tripole thing where it does cold, warm, cold, which just shuts down the Eastern Atlantic. Because
Hmm.
Professor Nordstrom had brought that up, talking about how your high production years, it's um, warm, cold, warm, where you've got the MDR and it's just this like blistering corridor from Africa across. And then your lockdown years are the years where your MDR is the bottom part of that sandwich. And, you've got a warm patch in the center flanked by two anomalously cold regions, which aids in subsidence. And like we were saying, it's not cold out there, but it is not as warm, like you said, as it was last year. And it's showing subsidence.
Yeah, that's right. And the thing is that sea surface temperature anomalies are related to sea level pressure anomalies, right? So that when water temperatures are cooler than average, for example, the sea level pressure typically is going to be higher than average. So if your Bermuda high is stronger, you have stronger trade winds, and it's therefore you've got more shear. I mean, there's all right. It's a whole thing that kind of goes on with a variety of factors that contribute to good seasons versus bad seasons in terms of the opportunity to develop. So we'll see because again, we are mid-July. Um, we are not at mid-September. We're not late August, right? Which is when you're going to be you typically climatologically see your most active. So this pattern can change, right? The pattern can change. And what we do know is that it's just not as warm across, right, the deep tropics this year as it was last year, right? We also know that things have cooled here
Mm-hmm.
in the Pacific, right? You got a little bit right, and you've got this extremely
Yeah.
warm, anomalously warm North Pacific, right? Going on, right? But you also, in the meantime, have got this cold tongue, like really almost a horseshoe shape here, if you think about it, right? That goes all the way around here like that. So, there's a lot that's going on in terms of that. So we just have to kind of wait and see. I mean, we've had quite a few storms in the Pacific so far. Right? They've had a nice
Yeah.
kind of a quick start to the season.
One
I
other
think one got to
thing,
a Cat 3 or Cat 4. I forget which one was that.
Eric.
It
Yeah,
was that
it
one
was
that just formed like a week ago. It like spun up
mhm,
really rapidly into like a Cat 3 and then fell apart.
Yeah, it's
mhm.
Hurricane Eric.
Eric, that's what it was. It was Eric. But
Another thing I've noticed about the Central American Gyre region for the past, really since like the beginning of June, there's been anomalously strong 850 millibar winds in that area. So anything that has tried to come off, because sometimes I've noticed that storms will form off of almost like a trough coming off of South America. You'll get a little inverted trough,
Mhm.
and then if it's nice and calm in that region, it'll spin up. But the 850 winds were like 30, 40 knots, driving everything that was spitting off of South America or anything that is forming as a storm in that region at all, this straight into Central America before it even has time to stack up. And then on the other side, nice and calm. So then you'll get these storms to form. Well, it was nice and calm. Now it's not as favorable on that side as well. So it's just we've hit kind of a lull everywhere except the Pacific, like the way West Pacific.
Yeah, and even the West Pacific, it's been underperforming the last couple of decades from because the whole sea surface temperature pattern globally is different than it was back from the 70s through the mid 90s, where the Atlantic was really shut down for 25 years. I mean, yeah, there were storms, but um, very different than what we've seen since the mid 90s. And back then the West Pack was, I mean, it was rip roaring all the time. I mean, it was I mean, you get them 20, you get them, throughout the year there, but far more than we've seen. And what has happened since the sea surface temperature patterns are realigned, right, is that the Atlantic has gone up and the Pacific has gone down. I think for the northern hemisphere as a whole, I think it's either about the same or even a decrease in net tropical cyclone activity,
mm-hmm.
Hmm.
right? Which is interesting. It's shifted from where it's been. Right? Because if you take down the most active part and shut it down, even when you take the Atlantic and you twerk it up, it doesn't compensate for what you've lost in the Western Pacific.
It's hard to match the ace that's accumulated in
That's
the
that
Western
that
Pacific.
that's exactly right. So when the AMO shifts to cool and the PDO shifts to warm, right, which will be happening sometime in the next 10, 20 years, something like that, because this is how long these cycles are, right? You'll see a shift in that again, right? And the tropical cyclone activity is the canary in the coal mine, I think, for this kind of stuff, because
Oh yeah.
it really does readily respond I remember, the 1995 season where I'd never seen a hurricane season like that in my entire life. They just kept coming. Another wave comes off Africa, and we're going through the whole list. I'm like, holy cow, this was like, although I don't remember this one, the 1933 season, right? Where if they named them back then, you would have run out of names. And it was after that, it was
Yeah.
like, well, okay, that's when we really entered this era of enhanced hurricane activity in the Atlantic. I mean, that's 30 years ago. It's been going on. So when I think of the last time the Atlantic flipped to warm, it flipped to its warm cycle in 1926, and then its cold cycle somewhere between 1965 and 1970. So it was like 40 years where it was warm. We got probably
Yeah.
another 10 years to go, and it's you started warm here and warm here, right? So there you go. The next warm cycle based on that, 2065. Right? Yeah, yeah. That's it. Yeah, we'll come back here then, and
Yes.
we'll
Cir
verify that.
Circle back around.
But I mean, that's the whole, and same thing with the Pacific. It's
Yeah.
they don't flip in tandem. Like one precedes the other or follows the other. You can look at it from a number of different ways, but yeah, and that's you'll see a shifting of that. But that's a long term. That's a decadal prediction, not is there going to be a hurricane in Florida at the end of August
Hmm.
type of a question.
More of the climatological.
That's right, because I mean, it's been really tough to have a really inactive Atlantic season
Yeah.
the last 30. I mean, you have some of the numbers are down lower. Maybe you don't get to double digits for storms, but there's like one or two with a big wallop anyway. Where I remember hurricane season in the 80s, four named storms,
Mhm.
five named storms, right? And it's like, you couldn't buy a tropical storm to save your life. Um, in some of those seasons.
And wasn't Andrew the only hurricane of the 91 season? I think it was. Like they started with a
Um,
bang and then it got quiet after that.
I know there was more hurricanes that year, but Andrew was the biggest and strongest, right? And that was, yeah, in 92, it was August, was it 24th, I believe, 1992, when it crossed Florida. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was a Cat 5. And it stayed a Cat 5 for quite some time, which was, pretty extraordinary. Um, but yeah, that was it. It was a front-ended season from that because I know we had there was Bonnie after that, and then Charlie, then Danielle and Earl. I don't know, did we get past Earl or Francis? We've only gotten down to Francis that year.
It's weird hearing those names.
I'm trying. Now we have to go and look it up, right? We have to go and look it up and see how far down because I don't think we got to George that year. But let me turn this off. Let me stop my share. We'll go pull up the 1992 hurricane season and see where we're at.
Isn't that weird to you, Josh? It's weird to hear Charlie and Francis talked about in any other season other than
Yeah.
2004.
Oh yeah.
I
Those
was like, oh yeah, those were names before.
those names will be forever scarred for anybody who lives in Florida. Gene, Charlie, Francis, Ivan.
I mean, now we got names that were just replacements that are now getting replaced.
And yet there's some that have been in use, right? Like Anna, right? Which is
Andrea.
you're right, 1979. Well, Andrea was a replacement name. That was a replacement name for what year is this? That was this year. It's 2024,
Oh, was
right?
that Allison?
Yeah, the 1812. I think so. Allison was the replacement name for Alicia from 1983. Which
Dang.
that was the Cat 3 when it went into Texas. I think Southeast Texas.
Then obviously we keep changing I names like changing socks. Like the curse of
Well,
the
yeah,
I now.
it's all fun and games until you lose an eye, right?
Yes.
Um, all right, so here we are, 92. Yeah, we got up to Francis. So yeah,
Wow.
there was Bonnie, Charlie, Danielle, Earl, and then Francis.
Wow.
Look
Quiet
at yeah,
season.
do I win the bonus round, right? And yeah, so I do
Wow.
remember that season, but let's see. Yeah, because Bonnie, that was did Bonnie make it to it? I think that was a two. Yeah, it was like Bonnie peaked as a cat two. And Charlie, that peaked as a cat two. And yeah, tropical storm. Earl was a storm, and then Francis ended the season. That was a cat one.
Wow.
But
In terms of numbers, like you had only two impacts to the US, but Andrew was just a monster. And then what was the other one? Bonnie
Tropical
or
storm. Yeah.
Danielle?
yeah, Bonnie was out
Danielle.
there in the Atlantic. That never hit land.
Oh, so it
Danielle
was
was tropical.
Danielle.
In fact, I was in graduate school that year, and I remember it was after Andrew. It was so dead in the tropics that when they were flying a plane out there, we were plotting it on the hurricane tracking map just to have something to do because that's how quiet of a hurricane season. But oh yeah, fun times, fun times.
Dang, what a weird season.
Yeah. The 93 was not a very good though Emily impacted the Outer Banks. In fact, that was the first hurricane I drove to the beach for. But
Hmm.
actually a bunch of us drove down here to the Outer Banks and rode out Emily, which just brushed the coast. I mean the it was cool watching because we didn't have laptops and there was no iPhones or anything like that. So we were at a hotel um, with a crew from the Weather Channel, believe it or not.
That's
And
sick.
it was something watching the local forecast and the radar comes up and you see a hurricane with an eye, like not that far from you, and it just says and the announcer's like your local radar showing any precipitation in your area and its movement during the last 90 minutes, and here comes this eye crawling up the Outer Banks. That was pretty wild, but that was another overall quiet season. Last system dissipated on September 30th.
Wow.
Ended early.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, I will tell you, October's during the cold AMO tend to be non-producers. It's really, that's one of the things I noticed the most between the cold and the warm phases is that October, October's do something
Like a light switch.
when it's warm. Yeah, it really was. Yeah, and that was it. There's Floyd 990. Dirt. That was a barely a cat. To Hurricane Harvey. There's Harvey in
Oh,
93.
wow.
All these retired names: Floyd, Harvey, Dennis.
Yeah, Irene was unused. Jose was unused. Katrina unused.
Katrina.
All these names because
Wow.
really, I mean, think about this, right? Here's the thing: the furthest we ever got down um, the list was there are two things here in 19 right for the longest time we got down to Hurricane Martha in 1969. Right, that was
Hmm.
the furthest down the list we'd ever gotten. That was We finally got to the end storm, Nana, in 1990. Right, so that was the first time an N was
Wow.
ever used for her, right? And then now we've gone through the list and then some. I mean, look at the other names here: Ophelia, right? Rita, Wilma, they're all Maria, right? These are all gone. Lenny,
All
Lenny,
retired.
Lenny was
Yeah.
the wrong Lenny in 1999. That was the wrong way hurricane because that was like a Cat 4 that went from west to east across the Caribbean. Not east to west. It went west to
Wow.
east. It's like, oh
Okay.
yeah, it was November, and it was like, wow, it's going the wrong way. But yeah, Irene's
Huh.
retired. They're all retired
Wow.
except for Arlene and Brett.
And Dennis
I
obviously is
don't think we
gone
should
now.
even use Gert.
What was that?
Gert's not a good name.
Yeah, you don't like Gert.
No, we
Yeah, but
should
see,
get rid of Gert.
you got
Well,
to
let's
be
look at a list
careful.
of storms named Gert.
You got to be careful with that because we made that joke with Wilma. See, we said watch Wilma be the big one in 2020 and 2005.
There it was. I'll never forget getting up that morning and seeing the pressure was 882.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I woke up and I was like, "What?" Caleb was
Well, I'll
just a
tell you,
baby. You don't remember
this
that one.
is something. This is something you mentioned at the beginning, Caleb, when you said that moisture from wannabe Dexter, um, is going
Yeah.
through Louisiana, that it's going to come back around and hit. Well, I
Mhm.
will tell you, right, Ivan the Terrible, 2004, right? This
Oh
storm,
yeah, the
right?
loop.
Oh, oh, I remember tracking that. You could see because it wasn't much of a surface reflection anymore after it was in land. You could track the vortex, right, at
Mhm.
500, and it moved back out over the water. And it's like you were following it. It's like it rode around the ridge and it regenerated. It was amazing when
Huh.
that happened. Now, I never got back to his former self, obviously, but it resurrected. It's like I remember the Hurricane Center putting out advisories.
Yeah.
Ivan is back.
Hit Florida twice in the
So if we
span of.
see that with 93L, I'll be amazed.
Well, yeah, they need to. I mean, at that point, it would earn the name Dexter.
Yeah, like it just survived going over all that land, even when it was trying to form, all the northerly shear it could eat, eating a freaking dry little Fort Max.
Dude, if it hadn't ate that dry shortwave, it would have absolutely gotten. That thing was structuring quick too, and then it just inhaled that shortwave and died.
It tried. It was
Dry
still
air is the death knell. It
it
really
was
is.
still tilted, but it was trying hard.
Dude, it had 75% of that eye wall closed off, and then that shortwave just sucked into the southwest side of that thing, and it just gone.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, the models handled that one super goofy too, because it was like I remember maybe the day before, so Sunday, uh, the the low pressure center for 93.0 was projected to basically be like Melbourne and then straight across to Tampa, emerge on the west side. That was like the mean thinking from the models. And then I'm looking at the surface low and I'm like, it's up here.
Hmm.
Because
It's
it's
going
because it caught the friction. It was the friction kept it offshore, and it just like if you watched it, it just bounced off the coast to Jacksonville, and then it got seemed like it just got
yeah.
on I-10 and went across. But I thought that was
Yeah,
neat
it
too,
literally
because
it was a Taurus.
yeah, I thought it was interesting too, because you could see it in real time. Because Professor Nordstrom was talking to us about how the center, especially of a weak storm, the center will stay offshore because it doesn't want to interact with land friction. I mean, we saw it classic. I mean, it went 150 miles up the coast before it came in because it was just, even though it
Hmm.
wasn't organized, it did not want to come on land. It wanted to stay
That's
offshore.
right. Friction distorts the wind field, and I've seen this where they bounce up the coast
Hmm.
because of that.
Yeah.
Now, it's when you have a really well-defined one center, that doesn't happen because you're right, other forces are at play. But when
Right.
you have a more broad and ill-defined center, oh yeah, I mean that's a real thing.
So we'll see what happens with it. I feel like more just heavy rain, honestly. I don't think it's going to be able to do anything because it's, at least from what I can tell,
Yeah.
it's still going to be under a decent amount of shear, and it's just going to pull moisture in. We'll probably get some stronger storms out of it. We'll hit that road up again, Trapnell Road. That's where all the flooding was, and if you get that kind of rain there again, we'll
Oh
just
yeah.
go through and we'll plow through feet of water. People like to do that down here. I don't know why.
I don't know. I don't turn around and don't drown.
Right.
That's all I can say to that.
New cars are expensive. Save
Yeah. Seriously.
your air
That's right.
intake. Save your transmission. I don't
That's
know.
correct.
So we're looking ahead. Not going to be too busy in the next coming weeks, but there is
Yep.
potential for change as we head into August and our peak season. We'll keep you guys updated, but for now, enjoy the rain. We're cutting back on the drought we've been experiencing. Hopefully that kind of carries over into winter. We hope to see some more winter rains because if we just get a ton of rain again this summer, we're going to have pretty much a rinse and repeat on fire season next spring. So see if
Yeah.
we can get more rain to stick around. Thank you guys for watching.